Welcome to another edition of Inspired Stories, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes, how they've overcome adversity, and explore current challenges they're facing.
Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Laura Hare, founder of Laura's Barn Preschool and Childcare Center, a daycare with 3 locations, one in Seaside, California, and 2 locations in Salinas, a state-subsidized location and another private location. They have been helping families raise amazing children for over 3 decades. They offer a comprehensive curriculum and sign language instruction and put a big emphasis on continuity of care to support infant development. They believe in the importance of consistent routines to help with self-regulation, cleanliness to lower the chance of illnesses, proper nutrition to help with your children's development, and a healthy dose of outdoor play to foster sensory exploration, motor skills, physical strength, and a positive connection with nature. And they have a weekly gymnastics instructor who visits, which the kids love. And before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. One recent client was able to add over $900 per employee per year in extra cash flow by implementing one of our proprietary programs. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefitsagency.com. Now, back to our guest today, the CEO of Laura's Barn Preschool and Childcare Center, Laura. I appreciate you making the time to share your story today.
Good morning, Anthony. Nice to be here. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So, Laura, tell me, what was the inspiration behind starting your first daycare center? How did that all come about?
There's a really interesting backstory. I was working, I was actually kind of working for a company that started online retailing way back when. And then my husband and I decided to split up, and I was left with two children struggling really hard with the divorce. And I didn't really know how to support them properly. I just knew I needed to be close and available to them. Well, the lady that was babysitting my daughter while I was working said, you should just open a childcare center so you could be home with the kids. You seem to enjoy, every time I come there, I was always playing with the kids and stuff. She's like, you seem to enjoy that. You could be home and available even when they're at school and those kinds of things. So that's kind of how it happened. And it started on this property my parents owned that had a barn. And that's how the whole name kind of came around. I have my original client, and he comes and sees me often. He's at Alabama studying kinesiology, and he's working on his master's at Alabama football team. So he's very excited. So these clients that I started with, I still know them. They still come back and visit with me. So that's kind of how I started Laura's Barn. I didn't think that was a career for me because I was always voted least likely to have children. Went to an all-girls school. Like they were like, there's no way. She didn't even babysit. So, but it changes when you have children. There's such sponges for information, and there's so many things that you can do to teach them and engage them, and just kind of, it doesn't have to all be A, B, C, D, E, F, G's. We used to go set up habitats for lizards in our giant sandbox and those kinds of things. So it was just a kind of niche that I fell into, and it just kept building on itself.
And so you started in your home to begin with. And how many children were you able to accommodate there?
8 at that time. And it was varying ages from infancy up to age. Well, some of them stayed with me till like 6th grade because they could ride the bus to my house, and they would come in and do homework and have a snack. And they became part of our family too. My son, my son used to call them my brothers from another mother. So it was, it
I
was
like that.
just, it was very, I don't know. I really enjoyed the teaching part. I missed that part, that component, but watching my new staff and new teachers and the team do what they're amazing. They're holding a graduation today for our preschoolers, and they just are phenomenal at developing that community feeling. And that was because I always thought centers were very cold and I like the home base. And so that was my goal. My goal was, this is not going to be center based. It's going to be home. These kids walk in, they're like, they know where their snacks are. They know all the teachers in the program. I mean, it's just their family. So that's how we kind of.
And so how did it evolve then from being run out of your home for a long time to then moving into some separate physical centers?
So I met my husband and I got married, and I opened another house place when we moved to Toro, which is this really nice area, very, we call it the old 50s type of neighborhood where kids are, running around, kids are playing. So I brought the center, my house business to that place. I developed, or I had my garage built out for the childcare center. I served the 8 kids. Then that was started in 2002 is when I opened. And then in 2017, a childcare business had gone out of business, which is probably like 5 miles from my house. And so I had families showing up at my door begging me to go and open this center because they were without care that they had signed up for, and this lady just shut down. It's a small community, so we everybody knows everybody. It's just the way Salinas is. So from there we went. I knew I could do the center, but I needed support. So my sister and I brought my sister in as partner. So we're 50-50 partners. She came in, helped with the style, the design work, the things that that's not what I'm good at. And that's what she's really good at. Like if you looked at our centers, you'd be like, oh my God. I mean, they're beautiful. And we make it a house, like a house style, so that children appreciate the things that their environment is. And I think that's important to teach children that too. So from that location, we ended up moving to, had a very open, like 12-foot ceiling. So it was very loud and very difficult to have those classroom sessions because it was so loud. So we decided after a year being there, schlepping propane tanks, that we were going to move to something that was a little bit better for our program. And we moved into about a 6,500 square foot building on the Monterey County Office of Education's campus. We've actually taken over some of the other rooms. It's kind of.
And so why were you schlepping?
Oh, because he wouldn't provide us heat.
Or why were you schlepping?
Yeah. So we just decided maybe that's why she left. I don't know, but it was just not a real, your landlord's important, but they also need to be just as reciprocating to you as you are to them. And we did a lot of improvements, made it a much nicer place. But when asked to have some bigger propane tank, a permanent one, it wasn't received. He was like, no, I'm not. You can do that, but I'm not. I'm like, he's kind of a basic thing, So we decided that when we went to MCOE, it was such a different experience. They were so welcoming. They know how important the need is for childcare in this area. So they even put in like a pour and play playground for us. They really helped us because we were just kind of starting out, but they really helped get our facility set up. They put new floors in. They put, just kind of added a kitchen because we needed a kitchen to serve food. So it was all part of granted we're paying for it, but it was still it was a totally different experience. I'm like, oh, is this what it's supposed to be like? Like you're fighting for everything. Could we have a hose to water some grass? That kind of stuff. Um, just so from there, then I decided that, I've been doing this a long time. I wanted to actually go into helping the lower income, which really subsidized should be for everybody, because anybody that's making a living wage now, it's hard. I mean, I know I charge about $2,000 a month for care. San Francisco is like $2,900 for care. But it's the fact we have to pay these teachers a living wage, and so that they can stay with these children. So that was, I don't know how I segued out of that, but the state subsidized program is great because it does help facilitate those things. So it pays for the staff, and it pays for the supplies and all the furnishings and things that we need to run a program that these kids are entitled to. So again, we have a very lovely center it's on Hitchcock Road. It's out in the middle of the country. So you look out and you're looking across at beautiful fields of lettuce, and that's our community, or it could be strawberries. It just depends on the season. And then we found another program that was for sale in Seaside. And so we just bought that last year. So we're kind of in the process of working on that. We got a grant from the state to help because it needs a lot of work. It needs a roof. It needs a playground. We've kind of band-aided it, painted it, cleaned it up, put new flooring in, but there's some real need for some real modifications for that program. That's going to be our big baby this year. And that will be our main focus, is getting that one done. But that's kind of how it morphed.
So I'm curious about the state subsidized location. How did that actually come about? And is that something that's accessible to other daycare owners to open a location that gets the state subsidies?
So if they're a center, yes, you can. But there's family childcare networks, which work with, California loves acronyms. They're like, I can go, I have a CCTR contract, but I don't have a CSP contract. I mean, it's like everything's an acronym with them, but they call them APPs, which is an alternative payment program. So there's a company that family childcare can go to and say, I'm looking for kids, and they'll be subsidized by those programs. Just as a center acquires the money, the APP programs acquire their money and then distribute it out to the providers. So it is something, it's just family childcare providers can't. There's a lot of back work that's why I'm actually now in an office, because there's so much paperwork and tasks, like they task everything. So I kind of just moved into that, with budgets and writing for grants and writing applications to expand my childcare and get more students enrolled, those kinds of things. So and then there's assessments that you have to have done for children, which are called DRDPs. It's a developmental, so they're following the children from infancy up to third grade, and those have to be done twice a year. So there's a lot of stuff, and I think they feel like the family childcare providers might be overwhelmed with all of those details. Knowing how I ran my program, I don't think it would be a problem. I just think that it might be problematic for some to do those things. So that's why they have these support. They have a program called MAOF, which is the Mexican American Opportunity Foundation. They're big in LA, and they have an office here, and they do the same thing. So people call, look for subsidized care, and they have a list of providers that they can send somebody to see if they like the program as a family child care provider.
So tell me about your curriculum and your overall approach to early childhood education.
I've personally, at first, when I was learning about the California state DRDPs and then the ECHRs, which is an environmental look at where children are, and then the curriculum. And the curriculum has to follow those two components. But you can also tailor your program to also do other things. So we do science. I like kids to experience science. And we had a teacher named Beatrice. And she would go up and we were always going, she's blowing something up in the yard. So, the Mentos and the Coke and the volcanoes and sinking or floating items. So those kinds of things kids love because it's very tactile and they get to experience those things, and they all wear their little goggles and their science outfits. And we have a few scientists that actually work for us and they just love it. They think it's great. So it's child-led. It's not teacher-directed, but it's child-led. So we want them, they have, specific daytime tasks that they do. We do a circle time, and we do the calendar, and we do the ABCs, the things that you have to kind of repeat on a daily basis. And we're open, all year round. So these kids are getting those things daily. We had a student go to take a test for one of actually it was the school I went, the all-girls school I went to, but it's co-ed. And I guess he went in and took the test, and he looked at the teacher and he's like, "Is that all?" It makes me laugh because these kids, if you feed them the information, they're just going to keep taking it and start reading. We try to teach them about, the United States. We try to teach them about artists and how to look through a painting and see the history behind the painting, and talking to children about the Mona Lisa and saying, back then they didn't have lights in their house. They didn't have targets. Where do you think they're getting their painting? They're like, don't they have paintbrushes? There was no, and so they would come back the next day and the parents are like, okay, they were telling us about how back in the day, there was no carpets in the house. There was no lights. And it's just giving them just introductions to different things that sparks an interest is kind of how we like to do things, along with the regular components that are necessary, holding pencils correctly so that they can write their names, but also giving them that. And then we're trying to get this grant from the USDA, which is going to do, it's going to have because we are in the heart of the ag belt. We are the green curtain is what Salinas is, where we grow everything, lettuce, tomatoes, everything. So we are getting a grant to build a greenhouse. And within that greenhouse, we're actually going to do vertical growing. So we're going to get some vertical, so we're going to teach the kids about vertical growing, and then getting them involved in the planting and getting them involved in the harvest, and then also doing maybe a sale of their harvest to the families. And then whatever's, of course, if the family can't afford it, we're going to be donating whatever we grow in these particular vertical gardens. And actually they're hydroponic vertical gardens. So when I first said that we were growing hydroponically, everybody was laughing at me. They were like, what are you going to grow in there? Tomatoes? And I'm like, no, you can grow all kinds of things. So that's like our next big project that we're going to do. And that will involve parents, children, the staff will all kind of be, it's about community. And this is how you kind of build your community around your program, is by getting things. And we have a lot of support with ag, companies here. I've already talked to where our garbage goes. They also do the soil and the dirt. It's not dirt, sorry, it's soil. And I've talked to them, and they're going to donate a bunch of their ready mix planting things for us too. So for our ground plants, but we're also doing the hydroponics. So it should be interesting to see how this is, because, kids love to be participants. And I think parents sometimes don't give their children opportunities to do things because they're really capable of doing a lot more than some parents may think they can do, I don't know. I really,
So Laura, I want to go back. I want to go back a little
okay.
bit because you started you were voted most likely to not have kids,
Right.
right? And then you start a daycare center
Yeah.
in your home. That's a big
Yeah.
jump. And then you move on to opening, physical
Correct.
centers. I'm curious, particularly as you went from the home-based center to a standalone center. Um, who you were able to lean on to sort of help you with that transition, because I'm going to guess it's a different set of organization, it's a different set of skills, it's a
Mm,
different set of needs, a different set of managerial aspects that need to come into play.
correct.
Like how did you kind of level up in that process?
So that is where the partnership with my sister came in. Also, additionally, we have a really good team of staff that's, I would say, within the last 5 years has really taken a run and made us definitely better. And their support and their ideas are always um, very focused on the family and whatever. It also focuses on the business. So they have ownership in the business because it's important to them. And if you can find employees like that, it's wonderful because they are also vested in what we're doing and they know the process. But I had an accounting background because that was kind of what I went to school for, and then my sister, like I said, she really handles the aesthetics. She handles the. I'm not allowed to handle HR. Okay. The joke is if you go in and talk to Laura, you're gonna and you're supposed to get fired, you would get a raise and probably a promotion. So my sister's like, you're done with that. And I'm like, thank you. I don't like that part. So having people that can take pieces that you're not good at is really important. So yeah, I lean on them. My dad was in self-employed. My mom worked for him, and so we have a lot of that self-employed drive and background, just from what we've done, my sister and I. And like I said, we work really well to balance, you know, talking about ideas. And like I already told her, I said, you're the project manager today or you're HR today. And then I kind of do the budgets and the audits and the documentation that needs to be done and keeping up with licensing expectations as well as the contract expectations, because every day there's something coming out and I'm like, what now? So, but
It's a lot. And this next question might be better for your sister because you said that she handles more the HR stuff. But you've touched on the importance of finding good staff, good employees, and kind of getting them bought in and wanting to play an active role in making the center better. I'm curious, especially with it being such a hard labor market. What kinds of things have you guys tried and seen have worked to recruit and then retain good talent, good staff?
So teacher shortage is very difficult, and California, the regulations are very high. So anybody coming in to work with an infant has to have a class. It's an infant development class that you have to take through college. 15 years ago, I wasn't part of this state funded program, so I could bring in kind of anybody that seemed to be interested in working with children. And as a matter of fact, one of the ladies that I hired over at our first location is still with us, and now she's a director at the center for us. But she didn't have any education, so you have to kind of get them started and support them and trying to provide them information on classes that are either paid for, which we've done in the past, or have grants that they'll reimburse them for for college courses. We also purchased a slot from theoretical college, was like $10,000, and they would get all of our staff that infant toddler class that we just, because I just said everybody needs to take that class. It's not an option. Everybody, from the bookkeeper to whatever, because if you need to be in that classroom with a child, you can't be in there unless you have that class. So they have some very big rules about things like that. So you have to kind of think, okay, how's that going to affect our program, and what should we do to make sure that that is a smooth, like I said, anybody could go into the infant class. So also we try to do fun things with our staff, and I have a really good site supervisor who they actually want to work for, meaning they like to do the right things for her. She just has a way about her that, and that's what you need. She motivates them. She doesn't make them feel bad if they've made a mistake, or what can we do to change those things. So providing the support, providing the education, getting them the classes. And so we try to look at Hartnell College, MPC College, even the high schools, because we don't have ROPs anymore. We're trying to, that's kind of our goal this year, is to work with some of the high schools to see if there's any kids that are maybe interested in this type of work. Like, they're babysitting already, so maybe they would like to come in and actually see what it's like to work in a center. And we like, they can take classes in high school, in college, if they would like to. And finding programs that are like 8 weeks, that was a big one.
Or yeah, I'm curious, what are some of the biggest things you think set you apart from other daycare centers?
I think it's just our environment. I think we have a really good team, and they make people feel important. They make them feel their child's important. They care. It's one thing to sit on like a bench like that behind me and try to monitor children versus being actually on the ground playing with the kids. These kids, parents will tell me they're saying prayers for so-and-so at night, or, they talk about so-and-so all night long or on the weekends. So they run in the door. We want them to run in the door and not run away. And that takes some very special people, very empathetic, and just conscientious about their children. Kids don't go home filthy. That was one of my things. I was like, I've seen in the past where kids are just like filthy. Like, I'm like, would you want to sit in that wet shirt all day long? You have babies that are drooling all the time. No, you wouldn't, or, they've got paint is something different because that has to come off of the bathtub. But I'm just saying, like, the runny nose or their hair's not brushed. So our girls will actually take the time and show them, this is how we clean our face. Let's brush our hair. And, those are important. That was what I wanted for my children. I wanted my kids to love to go to wherever they went. Whether it was school or, whatever activity they were involved in, because if you feel like they're being cared for, that takes that pressure off you. We also have an app that parents are able to see what they're doing. So every time they have something for lunch, they take a picture of them. They tell them how much they've eaten. They get pictures throughout the day. And this is the generation too. So you've got your, instant feedback is important to this generation that's coming up and for their children. So I think that helps a lot of the families feel connected.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, as a parent who, just a few years ago had kids in daycare, you drop them off, you go to work, and all day long, you're just wondering, how are they doing? Like, maybe they were having a hard time this morning when during the drop off, and like, are they okay? Have they gotten past that? And so, yeah, anytime we would get, some sort of an update, and you see a picture and they're smiling and they're playing with something, and it just puts your mind and your heart at ease at the same time.
It is important.
I'm curious, Laura, what are some of the most common concerns that parents have when starting their kids in a new school like yours, and what can you tell them to help put their minds at ease?
I believe the app is huge, because they're getting information all day long, not just once. So, like if you said your son had a hard time dropping off, the mom or the dad can message the teacher how are they doing, and then the teacher can say, oh, they're still struggling, but we're working on it. We're getting some breakfast in him, and maybe he's hungry. And then they also let them know, oh, they're doing great now. They're feeling much better, and sitting and talking to them. Transitions are really hard for kids, especially the COVID children that were, brought into the system. We were open during COVID, so those kids did fine. But the kids that were sheltered, for 2 years in their home, it was a huge change for them to come into these big, wide open spaces with teachers and kids, and they're not used to. So those kids we do gradually, but I always tell the parents we call it the tryout for the team, because we want it to be a good fit. I don't want a child to feel terrorized to be dropped off every day. That's not what we're about. So, we'll do just kind of get to know the child, let the child have a slower introduction where they come for a couple hours and then a couple hours more. And then we try to get them to nap time. And then once they hit nap time, they're usually good, and the parents are happy. Infants, there's a lot of parents with brand new babies. That breaks my heart because I know how they feel. So moms will leave and they're crying, and I'm like, we're here for you. Your baby's going to be fine. She's 6 weeks old, but she's going to be fine. We're really here for you to support you. How can we make you feel more comfortable? And that's really important, I think, for any program to, this is, and then having that schedule so they know what's happening. Usually with infants, though, at that age, they kind of pick their schedule. So we follow their schedule. But it breaks my heart when the new moms come and have to leave their kids off because they're a mess.
And new dads too.
Oh yeah.
And new dads too. I dropped my son off the first day at daycare, and it surprised me as I walked out that door. Tears just coming down my face. I thought I was looking forward to this. Like, right. Okay, like we can get back to, fully focused on work for the day. And it was like, I'm going to miss that little dude. And this is the first time I'm putting him in a, stranger's hands. Now, fortunately for us, the daycare that, we chose was, it's very close in our neighborhood. It had come highly recommended. Friends of ours had taken their kids there. We'd done a tour and met the owner. And so we felt, really good about it. I'm curious though, you probably get a lot of families that they're looking at multiple centers and trying to figure out like which one is the best fit for us. How can you sort of coach a parent through making that decision, and what should they think about?
I tell a parent, we call it mommy dar, like radar, mommy dar, and go with your gut. If your gut's telling you something, you're probably right. So, when you're visiting at places, and I'll give them a list of like, these are things you want to make sure they're licensed, they've got their CPR, and then get reference checks and things like that. We always, the families that are there will always offer to give a reference for our program. But it is a very personal choice for our families. And some families, we aren't the right center for them. And that's totally okay. There are some families who need more of a family childcare setting or smaller environment. It's kind of that personal choice is the way I look at it. So I don't take offense to someone that doesn't want to attend our program. That's totally fine. I want them to be happy because that makes their life easy. It's more about, the kids are going to do great where, in any program, but the parent needs to be just as satisfied and happy too, to know their child is cared for and safe and nurtured and loved. And they are a family. The little kids in the classroom they're funny. I'm marrying her. Okay. So, and I mean, I have kids
That's
that
great.
went to my program that went to high school together and are still friends. Like, it's really funny to watch that. And it's always Miss Laura, Miss Laura. Yeah. So that's kind of our
That's great.
feel on it. Our staff is the same way when they do tours. They want the parents to feel very comfortable.
Can you maybe think of one or two particular success stories of a child who, I don't know, maybe they were having a little bit of a hard time at first and then came to thrive under your care?
So we had a little girl, and we've had several, but they would come in and she would just be so sad. And like that kind of sadness makes us sad too, because there's different patterns to a child's sadness. It's I'm mad, or I'm not liking this, or just a generalized sadness from being separated from mom. And I think most of us understand that, and so we try to really work with a parent, like, could you bring us a picture? So when she's feeling sad, we can look at the picture, or we can write notes to mom and then give them to her at the end of the day. We could take pictures. We'll take a picture of you and send it to mom. So that child's feeling like, okay, mom, and a lot of it is she coming back to get me, and those kinds of things. And so we would try to give them a time frame that they could relate to. So we would say, okay, after nap and after snack, that's when pickup time starts. So a lot of kids will wake up and they'll go, it's nap, I'm going to have a snack, and then it's pickup time. And so trying to reiterate that so the children understand the day, and having visual cards on what we're doing next. So we're having breakfast and there's a table and their kids are sitting at the table, and reflecting back to those things that they can understand, I think helps a lot. And so she cried probably about 2 weeks, and we were like, oh, okay, let's maybe cut her back to half a day. And then one day she walked in and was like, good morning. I was like, we're all like, what happened? It's like they make that turn.
She suddenly became comfortable.
It's just, we've had a lot of them do that, where you're like, they walk in and they're like, good morning, I'm ready for breakfast. And we're like, okay, I have to recover from that now. So.
And I liked what you were saying about the sort of helping them with the schedule. I know, at times when we've had our kids at home, especially when they were younger, my wife, she's a speech therapist with young children. And so her brain's kind of wired to think this way, but she came up with like a Velcro chart with like visual elements on it. So we could, show our youngest son, like, okay, we're going to have breakfast in the morning. You get a little TV time, then we're going to go to the park, and kind of make it like a little bit interactive too. So like, if maybe they wanted to add something else in there, right? They knew what was coming next, and they had a little bit of input. And so it gave them a sense of understanding, and maybe a little bit of a sense of control too. And I think that was really helpful for them.
I always tell parents that there's three things a kid can control: potty, eating, and sleeping. That's the only things that they can literally control. And so when you're faced with those, when you're seeing that, you're like, okay, we need to give them some, control over what they, having choices for them to make. Even though they're your choices, you put it you frame it, and to help them make those choices.
So we talked a little bit about, some of the challenges that kids go through in daycare. I'd like to maybe explore either a personal or professional challenge, Laura, that you have gone through, and maybe some of the lessons that you learned coming through the other side of that.
Growth is always difficult, because you kind of think, am I making the right choice for this to grow the business? And then at a certain point you reflect, okay, well, I'm this old. Should I? And it's like, I found my niche in my 50s. Like I realized some of it, because we just started a nonprofit, and I found these things that I'm like, oh, I'm so excited about, and I want to do these things. And um, so things that were hard, I would say, it's always going to be about finances, when you're finding you're stretched thin and you're like, okay, how are we going to accomplish this task and get over this hump? That's probably a hard part, but that's most businesses. And self-employment is not for the faint at heart at all, because it is difficult. Banks are looking at you like, oh, you're self-employed. Well, no, you can't have funding. And so you have to get very creative and figure out ways to do certain things. Audit was my audit was my first time this year, because we have a state contract, we get audited. So we actually had audited financials. So that took about 6 months to kind of get figured out, changing our GLs and changing the way we categorize things, and becoming more, I told my sister, we're more professional now. We have audited financials. We're professional. But it's, like I said, it's not for the faint of heart. It's very, very hard.
You're all grown.
Yeah. So it's just, you have to be very.
You mentioned that you started a nonprofit.
Yes.
What was that like? What was behind that decision?
So we want to provide services for families. We want to not just daycare, but finding them housing, finding them jobs, finding growing our program with maybe some behavioral therapists and some occupational therapists, because there's a need for that within the program. We also want to have like a parent committee that's paid. One person's paid, and they run a parent committee that is involved in our programs to tell us how to be better. So this is we've just started it. And so we all sit there and we're whiteboarding all of our ideas, but we've kind of tailored it down to two things right now. And that's going to be a behavioral therapist or an occupational therapist, and finding someone that can go into programs and help, not just the student, but the parents and the teacher, because the teachers often need that support. They don't understand, they're trying to figure out, why is this child kicking and hitting and those kinds of behaviors. And so those are the hard days. The easy days are, you don't remember, but the hard days you remember for the staff. So we're trying to make sure that they have tools, and families have tools, because if you don't know about it, then you won't be able to. Like, I never knew about subsidized childcare when I got divorced. I probably qualified for all kinds of things, but not knowing those things kind of makes it hard for families. And so we really want to get information out that there's services, there's ways to find help. So that's kind of that component.
We had a little tech IT issues there, folks, but we're back now. And we were just kind of highlighting, what a big deal it is for small businesses, and, sort of the struggles that they go through behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. You've got these beautiful daycare centers, 3 of them now. You got lots of people working for you, lots of customers, lots of happy little kids running around. People, probably think it's just easy. The money just flows in, and they don't see those struggles and the challenges and everything that goes on behind closed doors to keep that engine moving. To keep people happy, to keep the doors open, to fix the furnace that blew out, and all that stuff. And so I think it's a moment to sort of, take a step back and, pat yourself on the back for being able to, for so many years now. How many years have you had your centers, including the home-based?
So since 2008, 2002, I can't remember, a long time.
Yeah. Okay. We'll say about 20 years,
Yeah.
all the, the sacrifices that you've had to endure to make it work up to this point.
Yeah, I would say that, the hard part is of self-employment that a lot of people don't realize. It's hard to buy a house. It's hard to buy a car. They don't like self-employed people. Banks don't, so you have to really, registering with, the government, SOS, what we call it SOS, is just state, where you're certified as like a woman's own business. And you think that, you could be generating all this cash, but I can honestly say half of it, if not a little more than half, goes directly back to the employees. And then the rest of it, you're paying your rent, your finances, and you're trying to take care of making sure you've got diapers on site and food on site. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart. I don't think any small business is anybody that's just rolling in it. Everybody struggles. And we were fortunate during COVID. We stayed open because we were supporting all the not first responders, but the doctors and the police officers, the firemen, anybody that had to be at work, we were providing childcare for. So yeah, it takes a long time before you feel like you can breathe, but even then you're still not going to be able to breathe because there's something comes up. Oh, we need a playground, and the costs of, child furnishings is astronomical. So,
as a business owner, obviously a lot of what we're trying to do, we're always looking at that bottom line, right? And how do we grow? How do we keep the doors open? And there's two big levers that we can pull. You can put them in two different buckets, right? It's like, how do we increase sales? And how do we, decrease expenses? As you think about those two levers, what are some creative things that you've tried and found success with?
So we used to send people to the store to go to Costco and get our supplies, but then we would be down that staff person because it takes a lot of time to do that. So we found Instacart. We loved Instacart. We could order 10, cases of diapers, 20 cases of diapers. Problem is the person that was going to deliver it had to sometimes make 2 trips. Because Blanco, we order 20 cases a month that go through them that fast. So finding supply chains that will deliver, that helped quite a bit because it took away from me having to go or Evelyn having to go or a staff person having to go. And then it would be brought to us. So that was one thing. The software programs that we use help, from bookkeeping, QuickBooks to ProCare. Those are 2 platforms that, have helped kind of streamline things for us as well. It's just finding AI. We're just starting to use AI for a lot of things for our answering services so that we can keep track of who's calling and needing care. And then they drop into an application or set up a time to come in and tour. Excuse me. The shift work was kind of hard to manage because you always need a closer and you need an opener. And that opener, you're like, are they going to come in on time? Is the closer going to make sure that, everything's closed up and locked up? So it sounds like a small problem, but it's a big problem in that you want to make sure that's really running smoothly. There's just, keeping your team happy, keeping employees happy. I think that's where I kind of come in as, okay, my job is to not oversee what you're doing, but rather support what you're doing. So what things do you need to be able to do your job? I don't like micromanagement. That's not who we are. Would never be like that, but we do expect you to work. And actually, it's not even me so much as the team. They're like, that person's lazy. They can't. No, they're they know what the expectations are. And they expect that from each other. So
that's tremendous. I mean, that says a lot about the culture that you've built there, is that there's so much buy-in from some of the employees to where they're going to call out the other ones who are not meeting that standard.
Yeah. And it's an important job. So we want that. These kids are important to us.
You mentioned a couple of new things that you're going to be offering. You're going to have a behavioral therapist and an occupational therapist come in. And I don't think people realize the margins in a daycare center are pretty tight.
Yes.
how are you able to make
So
that
we're going to
work?
get a grant. We're going to write some grants
Right.
for that, to be able to do that. But it's just, I think it's so needed, not just for this. I mean, I think I need it for the staff because that grows their abilities as well. So they're going to learn from a professional. This is, this is just normal behavior. This is how you can work with it. Or, providing some guidance, even to the parents who my child won't sleep at night. My child, every time I try to do something, they won't do these things. And having some suggestions and some people with experience in that area, in those fields, I think can really make the difference between just a simple shift to, even doing a larger shift, but it makes a difference for the families. And again, it's about the families and, getting them, they have expectations of us too. So especially our private program, there's a lot of professional people that work and have their children with us, doctors, nurses, all, and so, and they want their children to be on that advanced end of learning, and not because when you go to kindergarten, if you've got the basics from opening a lunchbox and eating out of it, people don't even think about those things, putting on a sweater when you're cold or taking it off when you're hot. Those are all things that we try to really coach these children on before they go to those programs. Academically, they're all fine. So really they're adjusting to the bigger class size, 25 kids in a classroom versus 8 to 12. Those adjustments, but those are a little bit smaller than having to do everything, and changing schools and all these kids and, not your buddies going to school with. And
Yeah.
so,
Laura, what's a fun fact that most people wouldn't know about you?
a fun fact.
Or an
Oh,
interesting fact?
an interesting fact. I don't know.
You're just an open book, right?
I am.
What you
I
see
am
is
that
what you get.
person. We laugh. And my sister's the opposite. So I'm like, oh no, here it all is.
It's just all out there. Okay, well
It's
then let me do a different one then. Are there specific maybe mentors or books that have helped you in your personal development or your professional career?
I think therapy is important. Mental health and therapy is important. Whatever it is, if it's just to go and talk to somebody and go, am I losing my mind? I have a really great husband. I'm very blessed by that. And I always tell him, you just make me be better. I don't know why, but I always feel like I'm going to be better because of you. And we have kids in our family that are doing phenomenal things. And I'm just like, I look at them and they're growing up to be coaches, like my sister's kids, they're definitely going to be coaches. They just have that. I have my kids are more of that entrepreneur side. So, yeah, it's just, I think you pull from the resources that are closest to you that you feel like have strived and done really well. And that's going to support you too, as well, because they've got great ideas. I mean, we've had Jeffrey which is my nephew, he writes up our question and answer quizzes for the teachers. And it's great. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's got a sociology major. Maybe but he thinks like a coach. He's been playing football through college and his last year's this year. And I can just see him, he's going to be that person. He motivates people. And that's really what you got to do too, is be able to motivate people that, at times it's hard to motivate people when they're, but you have to be there for them too when they're feeling sad or they need the support or, that's my job.
Well, I think you paid the ultimate compliment to your husband. How did you put it? You make me want to be better, or you help me
Yes.
be better.
Yeah.
I think that's a really nice thing to say. And the
Yeah.
fact that your kids, your sister's kids are growing up to,
Yeah.
position themselves so well for success, I think says a lot about how they were raised. So
Yeah.
kudos to you.
Definitely. Yeah.
Laura, I've just got one more question for you.
Sure.
But before I ask it, I want to do two things. If you're listening today and you like today's content, please hit the like, subscribe, or share button on your favorite podcast app. I also want to tell people the best way to get in touch with you, Laura. How would that be?
Usually email is the easiest, and it's just laurasbarn@outlook.com. We have a website. You can also connect through laurasbarn.com on our website. So those are, texting me is always good because we get so many spam phone calls that I don't even look anymore. I'm just like, I'll check, and I know who's supposed to be calling me. So I always say text me if you need to get in touch with me, because that's always the best way. It's most efficient anyways.
Okay, great. Well, last question for you, Laura. I'm curious, how do you see your industry evolving in the next 5 years? What are some of the big changes that are coming?
There's some big changes, and a lot of it have to do with TK, universal pre-K. Some of the schools weren't really prepared to have this younger set of children, and really they're not. In my opinion, they are so not ready to go into a kindergarten classroom. We have 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds that could now be accepted to these universal pre-Ks or TK programs, but some of them are still in diapers. Well, teachers aren't going to want to do that. Their class sizes are 24, students per teacher, where we have that smaller ratio. We laugh as childcare providers when they're like, oh yeah, the teacher just has them walk out of the classroom and go across the way and go to the bathroom by themselves. And we're all like, oh, we would be fined. That doesn't happen in a childcare setting. It's very controlled, and they're little, and there's a big age difference between a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old that's out on the playground. And I don't know. That's going to be the upcoming, at least in California. I don't know what that's going on in other states, but schools aren't really set up for that. They're not set up to have all bathrooms inside their classrooms, because that's what's needed when you've got a younger child, or smaller group sizes. They prefer those big group sizes, which at the smaller group size, you're going to get a lot more education for the children too. And they need to play, play to learn. It's not a bad word. As Mr. Rogers said, play is not a bad word. It's a good word. That's how they learn, is through experiences.
Do you see having to alter your business plan or business structure at all? Do you think that you're going to be losing more kids to those, free programs?
We've seen that, but then there's parents who want 365 days a year coverage, basically a year of coverage, not have summers off and having to deal with that. And we've seen a lot that end up pulling out for preschool and go off to other schools, but the infants has also been kind of our niche for our business. So I would say we probably have more infant care than we do preschool care, just because it's just slowly but then there's parents that just want that. I have parents this year that don't want their kids in TK, and so they'll stay with us. So they can actually stay till 13 as part of that CCTR contract. Not that they would, but the lady said, I've got an infant coming, I've got another infant, and then my daughter's in pre-K. And it's so much easier if I just can go one place to pick up, and she's a single parent, and I understand that, it's the convenience part, to the whole thing too, and just as much as keeping your children young while you can, because once they enter that big wide world of school, things change. There's not a lot of controls, and I think giving them a good foundation is really important to start.
Terrific. Hey, Laura, I want to be the first one to thank you for sharing both your time and your story with us today. I really appreciate it.
Anthony, I appreciate being here. It was a nice surprise.
Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.